Indigenous Language Revitalization through Digitalization with First Voices by Megan McLaughlin for ETEC 521 Indigeneity, Technology, and Education at the University of British Columbia in winter of 2023 for Dr. Amber Schilling. Before starting, I think it's important to place myself in the work by introducing myself and where I am from. Yo, nuka Megan McLaughlin, hetin gayakli Weewaikum. Hello, my name is Megan McLaughlin, and I'm from Weewaikum First Nations in Campbell River, but I currently live on the traditional, unceded territory of Yale First Nations in Hope. First Voices claims that it is a, quote, online space for Indigenous communities to share and promote language, oral culture, and linguistic history, unquote. The site also has community-based, quote, language teams who work with elders to curate and upload audio recordings, dictionaries, songs, and stories, unquote. First Voices is an initiative administered by the First Peoples Cultural Council, or FPCC, but FPCC notes that, quote, data is owned by communities, unquote. FPCC is an organization which, quote, is a provincial crown corporation formed by the government of British Columbia in 1990, unquote. When someone first goes onto the First Voices website, they are welcome to dive into, as the site notes, quote, over 75 language sites, many of which are accessible for public learning, unquote. It is important to note, however, as communities have control over their data on the site, communities can therefore lock their pages from the public, as shown via a little gold lock icon. Beyond the regular sections of the site, First Voices has a learning section just for our children. It is noted by the FPCC that, quote, data uploaded to First Voices powers auto-generated games, unquote. In the children's section of the site, images or videos are added to the various words, stories, and games to assist children in visual and verbal learning. I think that First Voices has the potential to be an active part of language revitalization. However, in my experience, it is hindered by lack of access. First Voices has multiple locked language pages controlled by language teams from communities, but this means that members, even those that are urban and away, have to wait for approval before they can learn their traditional language, which from my experience is not that quick. Although First Voices has its limitations, I, as an urban and away from home person, am grateful to have even limited access to a language similar to mine. First Voices is one of the only places I can access Kwakwala, which is from the same language family as Ligwada, the language of my people. At this time, I can only actually access Ligwada from my community's website. One important aspect of my journey with First Voices is that it makes me feel more connected to my ancestors. Even though I'm mainly learning my language Ligwada, I know that my effort in learning mine and one from a closely related language family would make my ancestors very proud. Further, learning both languages is helping me build my urban Indigenous self-identity. Before diving into my analysis of First Voices, I want to outline what I mean when I say Indigenous language revitalization. First Nations people have been oppressed by systems like residential schools that result in the loss of many of our languages. Sites like First Voices are a step in the revival and take back of not only our traditional languages, but our cultural identities that were stolen from us. In addition, it is important for me to outline what it means to be urban and away from home or urban Indigenous. Being urban Indigenous usually refers to those living in urban cities away from their communities. I also want to note that being urban Indigenous does not make anyone less than any other community members, but it does make their access a little more difficult, as I will discuss later on. Furthermore, I want to emphasize what digitalization in this context means. For me, I see digitalization as the movement of taking various oral and written stories and languages to an online platform. In the next few slides, I will dig deeper into the relationship between revitalization, digitalization, what it means for our people, and specifically what it means for our urban Indigenous. Candace Gala claims that technology is, quote, only as good as its availability, purpose, and use, unquote. Gala further mentions that technology and digitalization to many is a, quote, double-edged sword, unquote, that weighs both the positive and negative outcomes, thus highlighting the ethical imbalance that technology displays. When thinking of Gala's points, technology can only really work when access is available. However, for many Indigenous communities, there's a high lack of access to things such as the internet, devices to use the internet, and connectivity and Wi-Fi. When considering these factors, it is hard for me to see where First Voices fits into communities. Moving forward, Natalie Beloy highlights that urban Indigenous people are, quote, anxious to learn, speak, hear, see, and feel their languages, unquote. To this issue, Beloy highlights the act of, quote, acknowledging local peoples, lands, and languages, unquote, to address cultural diversities, and further highlights the act of, quote, making places for language in the city, unquote. When connecting Beloy's suggestions to First Voices, I think she raises the important aspect of honoring the land we are guests on, as we do not want to take over an area as colonizers did to us many years ago. To her second suggestion, I believe First Voices can be a part of this movement as it allows connection with traditional stories, songs, and language that is hard to access away from community. Amber Schilling notes that youth have, quote, the desire to build and maintain relationships with knowledge holders, unquote. She further highlights the benefits of bringing youth into the revitalization as it, quote, offers the potential for increasing positive outcomes, unquote, as the youth hold much knowledge on the technology necessary for revitalization that many of us don't nowadays. Schilling presents many important factors in the discussion of urban Indigenous youth, as they hold the imperative role of sharing traditions with future generations. In terms of First Voices, Schilling quotes a youth as saying that the site was, quote, not very user friendly, unquote, thus highlighting the importance of youth involvement in digitalization as they have more experience with technology. Gallup, Beloy, and Schilling present imperative aspects to consider when we are looking to revitalize through technology. I completely agree with Beloy and Schilling about the important role of our urban Indigenous youth. Our youth are an essential factor to our technological success and revitalization that we've been missing as they steer us away from the slippery slope which Gallup noted technology can be. In closing, for me, First Voices is just the start of where I and many others want to see our language revitalization. The site has both faults and benefits, but so does most technology. I still think that the path towards revitalization will be a bumpy one, but with the tandem work of youth, community, and elders, there's so much potential for great language revitalization through digitalization.